For as long as I've been interested in art, I have been fascinated by the works of Johannes Vermeer. The way that Vermeer plays with light, the minute details that he can put into even the smallest of works, the quiet nature and atmosphere of his pieces, it all just combines to absorb the viewer, to make them feel like they're a part of what's being depicted. Add to that the unknowns about Vermeer's life, who trained him, whether or not he used a camera obscura, whether he was a Catholic or a Protestant. It all just proves irresistible for me. One of the contenders for the title of my favorite Vermeer is a piece called The Art of Painting. Like a lot of Vermeer's, it depicts a quiet indoor scene, an artist at his easel with a model posing for him. But to really understand what this painting is about, what Vermeer was trying to say, we have to dig below the surface, at the symbols being depicted and the history of those symbols. Only then can we really begin to understand this work by its other title, The Allegory of Painting. First, let's consider the painting at face value. In the foreground, on the left side of the canvas, a tapestry is pulled back to reveal the artist's studio to us. He sits at his easel, working on a canvas to which he has applied a neutral base, as well as sketched out the basic figure of the model. The model, dressed in a blue robe and laurel crown, holds a horn in her right hand and a large book in her left. On the far wall, a map of the 17 provinces of the Netherlands is prominently displayed. West up and north is to the right, with an elaborate chandelier hanging from the rafters above it. So, in what way is this painting allegory? Allegory is a narrative, making use of symbols to express an idea or tell a story greater than the appearance of those symbols. To explore this painting as a work of allegory, it is these symbols which we have to break down. First, the artist. It becomes quite clear after looking around this room that it is not, in fact, a literal painter's studio. While the painter's hand rests on a maul stick and grasps a small brush, all of the other tools a painter would need are missing. Add to that the artist's clothes. The slashed jacket, silk stockings, and black beret he wears were the height of fashion in the 1660s when this work was created, and would not have been worn in a studio where they could be ruined by paint or chalk. Also telling is the artist's position, facing away from the viewer, intentionally kept anonymous. While light comes pouring in from an unseen source on the left of the canvas, the artist sits in shadow. The viewer's focus, like that of the artist, is on the model. All of which suggests that the figure is not meant to portray a specific person, but rather to represent the idea of an artist. Consider now what the artist is painting. Although he has sketched the broad strokes of his work, he is currently focusing on the laurel leaves, an area filled with detail and likely to take time. So why then does the model continue to hold her heavy book or awkwardly balance the trumpet? Unless she too means more than her face value. The model is an allegory by herself, representing Clio, the muse of history. Her appearance is taken straight out of a reference book for allegorical representations called the Iconologia, written in 1593 by Italian Cesare Ripa. The Iconologia is a reference work immediately popular with artists, describing emblems of concepts based on mythological symbolism. For instance, if an artist wanted to portray the idea of dignity, according to the Iconologia, they would show a woman, richly adorned, but is like to sink under the burden of a huge stone, enhanced within a border of gold and precious stones. Load expresses dignity, because that, proceeding from the care of public affairs, is a very heavy burden, and hard to be supported. In the case of Clio, the Iconologia describes her as a girl with a laurel wreath, holding a trumpet in her right hand, and in her left a book, inscribed with the name Thucydides. Thucydides is an appropriate choice to represent history. Writing in the 4th century BC, his History of the Peloponnesian War is one of the great works of ancient Greece, rightfully earning him a place as one of the fathers of history. The trumpet Clio holds is meant to represent fame or glory, while the laurel wreath indicates that, through the writings of history, things of the past shall live forever, just as the laurel is at all times green. The Iconologia was first published in Dutch in 1644, and Vermeer was obviously familiar with it, borrowing heavily from it not only for Clio, but also for the symbols he used in his other allegorical painting, the Allegory of Faith. The map on the far wall, behind the model, is obviously meant to be significant, not only because of its size, but also the care and detail Vermeer puts into it. The inscription at the top is Latin and translates as a new depiction of the 17 provinces of the Netherlands. However, when this work was painted, it was most definitely not a new depiction. This map was first printed in 1587, with Vermeer's version a later reprint coming out in 1630. And what makes this interesting is that in the 1660s, when Vermeer was thought to have done the art of painting, the Netherlands no longer contained 17 provinces. In the mid-1500s, the 17 provinces were the subjects of the Catholic King Philip II of Spain. 1568 would see the beginning of the 80 Years' War, an independence movement by the 9 northern, largely Protestant provinces, which would officially end in 1648 with the Treaty of Münster, formally establishing the 9 provinces as the Dutch Republic. The border between north and south? Right about where a large crack appears on Vermeer's map. Now let's look at the whole painting again, this time through the lens of its symbols and their history. A tapestry is pulled back, as if revealing something hidden to the viewer. It shows an artist's studio, but an idealized one, where the concept of an artist is creating a portrait of Clio, the muse of history, who records and celebrates the past. The artist is focusing on her laurel wreath, a symbol of eternity, of perpetuity. She stands in front of a map which has already become outdated, with the formation of a new and very wealthy nation, which included Vermeer's hometown of Delft. So perhaps what we see here is not just one man's idealized version of an artist's workshop. Perhaps what we are meant to see is one man trying to find his place in history, his attempt to come to terms with his legacy through his own work. Even more than that, his musings beyond himself of a search for his country's place in history. Or perhaps we are seeing his struggle with the nature of art's lasting influence, that through painting, history can be preserved for posterity. While there are many different interpretations of this work, some very broad, others incredibly specific, one thing is generally agreed upon by scholars. This painting was very important to Vermeer. Despite being one of his best, he never sold it. Shortly after his death in 1675, his widow transferred the painting to her mother in an attempt to keep it away from creditors, looking to settle the many debts Vermeer left behind. After 1676, the painting is not heard of definitively for over a century, when it was acquired by the Austrian Count Suzerain in 1813. At the time, it was thought to have been a work by Pieter de Hooch, whose signature was actually forged onto it. It was revealed to be a Vermeer in 1866 by researcher Théophile Thoré, who was near single-handedly responsible for Vermeer's resurgence in popularity. In 1940, it was purchased from the Suzerain collection by Hans Poss, an art agent acting for Adolf Hitler. It was recovered by American forces in 1945 from a salt mine in Altaussee, Austria, along with thousands of other works and treasures that had been looted by the Nazis. Today, it is the property of the Austrian government, and is on display at the Museum of Fine Arts in Vienna. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I know this was a little bit of a departure from kind of the normal stuff that I cover here on the channel. I hope you liked it. Do you have a different interpretation of what Vermeer was trying to say with the art of painting? Do you have a favorite work by Vermeer, or another work of art that you'd maybe like to know a little bit more about? Be sure to leave it in the comments down below. While you're down there, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our latest episodes. As always, you can find more interesting and unusual stories and histories over at the website BookwormHistory.com. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for stopping by. One of the contenders for my favorite work by Vermeer is a piece called The Art of Painting. Like a lot of Vermeer's, it depicts a train going by. That would have been something in 17th century Holland.